Hello, everyone, and welcome to another exciting adventure here at Of Duelists and Drunkards. I'm Mr. Panda.
And I'm Rockstar.
This is the podcast that will make you wonder, who is that man in that closet with that young woman? First thing we're going to dive into is current events, because you're all really excited about that. First thing we would like to advise you is that the streaming service High Dive is going to have available the new Initial D movie starting September 10th. Now, as you might know, I am not a huge fan of the High Dive service. However, this is an important point for those of you who want to access new anime. Be sure to check that out if you are a subscriber of the High Dive service. Next up, we have a new Digimon movie that's slated for release, coming out for the 20th anniversary. It's going to feature our heroes at the age of 22 and an all-new adventure. I'm sure you're all very excited to hear about that. We know Forba is.
Speaking about new things, we have 3 new Harry Potter books coming out. One is titled A Pop-Up Guide to Hogwarts. The other one is Creatures, a paper scene book. And the last one is Imagining Hogwarts, a beginner's guide to movie making.
So was one of them like an actual pop-out book?
Yes, the Hogwarts one is an actual pop-up book.
Is it titled Mischief Managed?
No, it's titled what I just said it was.
Well, that's wrong. That's not what it should be. Next thing on our current events list, we have the announced retirement of Yuka Imai. She is a famous voice actress who started her career in the mid-90s. According to Anime News Network, this is following her 2017 hiatus where she wanted to spend more time with her son, who had been diagnosed with pervasive developmental disorders. It sounds like after spending a lot of time with her kid, she's decided to go from hiatus to official retirement. Those of you who follow Japanese voice actors will undoubtedly remember her from Wedding Peach. I personally remember her from the Crest/Banner of the Star series, the Sakai trilogy, where she played Jinto Lin, ironically, the male character. Last bit for current events that we have right now, besides our con schedule, is the continuing developments in the Salt Lake City Comic-Con case, or as they now want to call themselves, Fan X, Salt Lake Comic Convention. Because that's going to make things much, much less complicated, I'm sure. The judge on that renewed case against San Diego Comic-Con has ruled in favor of San Diego Comic-Con, as you may have heard. That means they have to stop using the name for the time being, they have an injunction against them, and unless Salt Lake City is planning to file some more appeals, it's not looking good for that particular legal battle. Now, you may or may not be aware of this, but we're not strongly in San Diego Comic-Con's corner here.
I kind of feel like it's the Fine Brothers trying to trademark React, personally, but...
Now, well, here's the fairness point. San Diego Comic-Con and Comic-Con International have, in fact, been using the Comic-Con name, the shortened form of Comic Convention, for a significantly long time. Within a few years of them establishing their event, they were using that form, which is fine. We acknowledge that. I think that the problem for me personally comes in that they really only started to look at legal protections for it from the Federal Trademark Board at the turn of the century. I think it's right around 2006 is when they officially trademarked it. And if I understand correctly, they weren't even the first group to actually submit for a trademark on the term Comic-Con. It just so happens that the other group that had one let it die. I don't know. I'm not really sure how I feel about this entire process. For me, I've been told that there's some other shady things in the background when it comes to the Salt Lake City group. I don't know, and I'm not party to any of those backroom discussions. But what I think is weird is that the term Comic-Con has become generic in the fan community. I honestly do not know anyone who would say, I went to Comic-Con and automatically there's no question in their mind, oh yeah, San Diego. They continue to call it San Diego Comic-Con. On the side, they have the big Comic-Con logo and it says right above it San Diego Comic-Con. I really don't understand the mentality here other than just punishing fellow fans. Why do you have to do this? Especially, I mean, maybe it's an issue of proximity. Salt Lake City is a bit closer to San Diego than some of the other groups, but I mean, what the heck has New York Comic-Con got to do? I almost feel like this was mostly about finding the kid on the block that they could actually pick on and win against.
Yeah, I agree.
And once they have that court precedent, the other cons are going to have a much harder time fighting it if they want to. if they had gone up against New York Comic Con, I don't know if this fight would be going so badly, quite honestly. I hope that there is still an ongoing effort with the Patent and Trademark Office separate from the courts where they might consider not allowing the protection of just the term Comic-Con, because I feel like San Diego Comic-Con clearly has title to San Diego Comic-Con. I really don't know if they are morally entitled to just the term Comic-Con, because outside of maybe a few mainstream news outlets that are being technical, I can't imagine that the majority of people honestly do think of them as the only Comic-Con.
I don't.
So that wraps up the news reporting and current events. Going to refresh you on our con schedule here before we dive into our first discussion topic, which will be, incidentally, about one of these cons. So, we have Colossalcon East coming up, and at the time that we post this video, we'll just be a few short days out. It's going to be at the Kalahari in Mount Pocono. We hope to see you there. We're doing at least 8 events, and we'll have a table. We'll be selling all sorts of sweet merchandise. You might actually have noticed that in our little table setup here, something that you might very much enjoy will be at the table for sale as well. Right after that, well, no, not right after that. We have like a month break, don't we?
Yeah.
We'll be making some more fun videos. In October, we have a series of events, including the first weekend of October. We're going out to our first showing at a Comic-Con. Cleveland Comic-Con in this case, though, I don't know. I guess they're going to have to freaking rename themselves.
Yeah.
Fairgrounds Comic Expo. That's what they'll call themselves. Speaking of which, it is, in fact, at the Cuyahoga Fairgrounds, just a bit south of Cleveland, and it's 5 minutes from Zoop. So we're going to be doing a whole bunch of Game Show Impossible content there. So if you've ever wanted to see the new revised forms of all those fun little game shows, win some fabulous prizes, we hope that you'll come out, especially if you are in the Ohio area. It's only $10 per day. Exciting. The week thereafter, we have a double header con weekend. We're going to have most of the team up here in good old Pennsylvania at Stroudsburg for YushiCon. Meanwhile, I and some interns will be down in Virginia at the Tank Museum for KantaiCon. Very excited to get to ride a tank again. At the end of October, we're going to have one event only. Unfortunately, I don't remember if we came out and were completely clear about this before. ShikariCon has added a delay, and they are now planning to hold their return convention October 19th and 20th in 2019. Now, we're looking at possibly showing up there again next year as well. However, we won't be there this year, obviously. But we are still going to be at the O3 Media Festival here in Bloomsburg, Pennsylvania, on the Bloomsburg University campus in the Centennial Building. That is, I'm finally going to get it right, October 27th. I kept saying it was Saturday, and that was correct, but I've misquoted the date of the month incorrectly every single freaking episode. It's October 27th.
Do you see the wonders of writing things down now?
October 27th, Saturday, be there or be square. We're going to be there. Winning the War on Pants is going to be there. A bunch of other people. We're hoping to have both local people, the community, and people from out of town coming in. We actually have an advertising budget. We're very involved with this particular event, and we like to use it as a way to test bed a lot of new stuff. So if you want to hang out with us in a much more relaxed environment and see some of the new content that we have coming up for the next year, this is the time to come up. Now, we do have 2 conventions in November. We still have not been officially announced for one of them, so I'm just going to throw it out there. The first weekend in November, we are going to BonsaiCon, or at least I will be at BonsaiCon in Columbia, South Carolina. If you are from the South, if you are one of our fans who's just been waiting around for us to show back up down in the Carolinas, here's a good opportunity. I think it is if it isn't the biggest convention in South Carolina, it's very close. It's held at the Columbia Convention Center. Great space, lots of people, good times. So be there. That's probably going to roll out our entire year, with the exception of the one unannounced venue, unless something changes for December. With the con schedule wrapped up, we're going to head into our first discussion topic, which is going to be all the panels that we're doing at Colossalcon East. Aren't you excited? There are so many. 8. We have 8 panels, in fact. Number 1, Rockstar.
We're doing Game Show Impossible, Tame That Gaming Tune.
That's going to be you, because I might not be there yet.
Well, we're doing a playlist for that, aren't we?
Well, I
It's
mean,
going to be all
we're gonna
different
have a whole bunch of
consoles
stuff.
from all different generations and, all different types of games. So,
Heavy concentration in the retro field. So if you're a fan of game music, think of our regular Tame That Tune event, but about game
Games.
music. And it's so weird, too, because this is actually the first time that we've done this in a long time. And when we've worked with the company that runs Colossalcon East on several different conventions, and frequently there's been this weird scheduling thing where the list that we get says Tame That Tune, so that's what we do. But then for some reason, Gaming Tune showed up on the schedule like twice. So it was just like, oh yeah, well, I showed up for this. Oh, well, that's not what we're doing.
whoops.
This time, for real, come out, Game Show Impossible, Tame That Game Tune.
And then the next one is It's an Abomination.
That's all Rockstar. It's an abomination. Japanese myths and popular culture. Tell them
Right.
a little bit about your panel, Rockstar.
Well, it highly focuses on yokai and the types of yokai and what you would have known them as. Typically there's a lot of Pokemon in this particular panel because a lot of Pokemon are based on yokai. But it also kind of revolves a little bit around the wonderful career of Mizuki Shigeru, who is basically the father of yokai modern media. So, come and see that.
Next up,
Boku no Pornorama 2.
From Nippon with Love. If you've been following us for a long time, you know all about Boku no Pornorama. It's one of our headliner events. It exhibits our favorite Arrow material. This is a Manly Battleships original. Starting in 2012, we premiered the original Boku no Pornorama at Otakon. And since then, it's grown into a series exhibiting different categories of what we're getting at. But what you really have to understand about Boku no Pornorama is that it's personal on some level. We don't just show you random porn clips and call it a day like some hentai panels. No, this is curated. This is commentary. This is taking you through exactly why you need to see this stuff. Unless you get somehow to Boku no Pornorama 4, and then you'll only watch once. Now, if you've seen Boku no Pornorama 3, Vanilla's not enough. This is not the same event per se. Much like with Your Running You Should Feel Bad, every different incarnation has different content to one extent or another. It just so happens that in Boku no Pornorama, it's a lot more structured. So 2 has mostly different content from 3, and if you ever happen to see 4, 4 is very different from number 3. So that's one of our, actually, I think that's our first 18 plus event. Yeah, it's our first 18 plus event during Colossalcon East, which is Friday night.
Wait.
Isn't it?
I thought It's an Abomination is 18 plus.
Oh, well, maybe it is. So
yeah,
I could
because
be wrong.
I have a special little surprise at the end of my panel. But if you want to see the surprise, you'll have to come see.
So, going into Saturday.
Game Show Impossible, I know that voice.
Hooray! Game Show Impossible, I know that voice. And that's actually, we have this great break where I don't have to do anything between Friday night and Saturday afternoon, which means I am going to be doing what this podcast is all about.
Not dueling, I assume.
There are no duelists. Never.
Well, I know that voice is a panel that's put on by Streak, and all the research is done by Streak, but it's basically a game show where you get to tell us who that voice actor is and what anime they're from. Typically, we accept anime, don't we?
Yeah. Most of the original basis is in anime because that's where a lot of the voice talent in the convention circuit stems from. But recently we've also expanded it to the point where we do incorporate a lot of American cartoon roles. We incorporate video game roles. And primarily the reason for that is because, I don't know if you're aware of this, guys, frequently, at least in modern terms, most voice actors don't just do anime. It's actually very uncommon to only have a voice actor doing anime roles these days. Usually they've branched out much farther. Either they're regular actors, more frequently they just do voice acting across the board. And so we were able to pull a lot of different samples. And with the most recent revision, in addition to doing our new Impossible shouting all the time, we cut it down to a much shorter field so that if you listen carefully over the course of the entire event, you'll actually pick up on who these people are, with maybe the exception of Damon Mills, because Damon Mills has this weirdly exaggerated range where one minute he's this whiny little Ouran High School-like character, and the other minute he's like a Russian skating instructor, and it's like, I don't know who this is.
Well, it's still called Impossible for a reason. We have to throw one loophole in there.
Indeed. This is a good time to remind you all that our game show Impossible brand, owned by Manly Battleships, has its own Facebook page. Woohoo! You should check that out. We also have rolled out Game Show Impossible t-shirts. Yay! Featuring the wonderful Impossible face by Forba. You can find that at our table, or if you're really, really desperate, you can shoot us a message and we can probably still hook you up with one with some inventive mailing techniques. Moving on to the next event, we have Star Trek We Used to Be Explorers.
You skipped one.
Did we?
Yeah, you did.
Oh, that's my fault.
Actually, you skipped more than one.
I skipped all the 18-plus ones on Saturday.
Of course
I did. Of course, the next one is You're Running, You Should Feel Bad. Trademark.
You just want to continue that break from Friday into Saturday.
Yes.
And pretend you don't do anything on Saturday.
Yee. You're Running, You Should Feel Bad, if you do not know, is another one of our headliner events. 18-plus, of course, because why not? The entire premise of You're Running, You Should Feel Bad is we take the things that you're supposed to like, the good things, the critically acclaimed things, and unlike other shows that rip down the bad things you already know that are bad, we take the good things and explain to you why they're terrible. Innovative. Fun. I'm actually not sure which episodes we're doing this time.
You're not supposed to tell them anyways. It's supposed to be a secret.
Well, yeah, I know.
Supposed to find out when you get there.
Yeah, show up, guys. It's going to be a lot of fun. Next, we have Of Duelists and Drunkards. Live. A panel that has changed in many ways over the years to be many, many different things, and is now the line for our podcast. I keep saying that this is going to be one of our headliner events. It's all kind of a matter of logistics and resources at any one time. Currently, Of Duelists and Drunkards acts as our variety show late night event. The idea is you all show up, and we put on a fun little show for you and entertain you for exactly 60 minutes. That is the entire premise of that show.
Oh, yeah.
And that's it, really.
It's just pure entertainment. Come for laughs.
Some skits, some sketches, some monologues, perhaps. I gush on about a whole bunch of stuff. Maybe some music. Won't that be fun? I should haul out my keyboard and play you a little ditty. Oh, and of course, we'll exhibit some fun videos for you, too, from our collection.
Yep. Now you can move on to Sunday.
Well, you can talk about Star Trek. I need a drink.
Star Trek, We Used to Be Explorers. This kind of just goes into, if I remember correctly, because this is Streaks, baby, a lot of the fan projects of Star Trek. We go into Star Trek Discovery, and we also go into Orville. And we basically point out the pros, the cons, and all the other little fun issues that go into both of these shows so that we can talk about Star Trek as the fandom moving forward.
Broadly speaking, it's about whether or not the true successor to the original Star Trek is the official canon from Paramount, etc., or the fans.
Yep.
Ponder that one, ladies and gentlemen. Finally, I think we're at the last one.
Yes. We're at David Bowie, the rock and roll space invader from Japan.
Isn't that a mouthful? Just like David Bowie.
Well, it would help if Stick wouldn't keep changing the title.
Well, the rock and roll part's not on the printed schedule, and I can't fix that, so... It's exactly what it sounds like, ladies and gentlemen. This is one where you literally don't even have to read the description if you don't want to. It's all there right in the title. It's going to talk about David Bowie, his influences, and how he influenced other people. In particular, there's going to be a lot of focus on Japan, because, if you didn't know, Japan plays a huge part in the constant reinvention of who David Bowie was. We hope that you'll want to check that out, in particular, because the Streak is very proud of this one.
And this is also another panel that changes constantly because we're always talking about all the different shows that he influenced, all the different creators. So you'll constantly find new media that maybe you did know David Bowie was in and maybe you didn't. So if you want to learn more media that David Bowie was in other than just his music, definitely come out and see this one.
For our next exhibit, we're going to be trying some more soda. Aren't you all excited there at home?
Well, of course they're excited. They don't have to drink the shell. We do.
For those of you who are listening, you're just going to have to enjoy the sweet, sweet sound of disgust.
Of me going, ugh.
But for those of you who are watching the video, you'll have already noticed in our fabulous 1080p the two sodas that we're going to be trying. The first one is from Nella Bella, Pistachio Cream Fizz. Sounds delicious.
I don't even like pistachios.
This one, the second one, is again from our friend Lester's Fixings. And this one is the Peanut Butter and Jelly Soda. Rockstar, which one do you want to try first?
Let's get the one that I know I already not going to like out of the way first, and let's drink the pistachio one first.
And I get the peanut butter jelly time. Peanut butter jelly time. Peanut butter jelly time. Where you at? Where you at? Ready?
Yes.
I'm getting a lot of the flavor that they're thinking of as the jelly and not so much of the peanut butter. It's... In fact, if anything, I taste more bread than peanut butter. That's a very odd flavor to have in a soda.
Yeah, well, the pistachio cream fizz over here tastes like the LaCroix of pistachio cream fizz.
It kind of smells like pistachios. Are you going to try it? Go on. Go
okay.
On. All right.
Peanut butter jelly.
Oh my god, that is LaCroix.
I told you it was
Holy
LaCroix.
crap!
I mean, not good LaCroix. Let me just...
There's no such thing!
I drink LaCroix. I have...
And look at where you are in life!
Yeah, sitting
working
next
on
to
a
you.
podcast!
Sitting next to you.
Oh, God. Oh, man. I kind of want to like this, but it's like, it transfers the pistachio cream. It's like, it transfers immediately from the cream to wood.
It transfers
It tastes like
seltzer.
wood.
Wood and seltzer. And you're right about the peanut butter jelly. I didn't get the peanut butter at all, but that jelly, it
tastes kind of like Welch's.
Just straight Welch.
It's corn
and
syrup.
Salsa. Yes, that's
It's corn syrup.
It's literally all it is just corn syrup. It's horrible.
Though, in fairness to Lester's Fixins, Lester's, in fairness,
alliteration.
don't
dude.
take up our review as some kind of fraudulent statement. It does only use real sugar. Just saying, the Welchie flavor reminds me of that cheap corn syrup stuff.
All right. Well, we're gonna.
Well,
put
those are going right back here, and they can stay there for the rest of the day.
They know what they did.
I actually don't want to smell them either. That's why we're putting the caps back on. Wood and fizz.
Oh, okay.
Wood and fizz.
Oh, so now that we've gotten that.
No. I need to cleanse my palate.
Oh, I've been cleansing my palate.
So then, now that we've done another product exhibit, it's time to move into our second discussion topic. One that I'm sure you're all super excited to hear about. Which is going to be about the Brony Implosion. If you're not sure what we're talking about, here's the breakdown. Rockstar, take it away.
You're starting with me. Okay.
What is happening in the Brony community?
Well, it depends on who you're asking. But ever since BronyCon down here in Baltimore announced that they're done. Are they done this year or next year?
It's going to be next year.
Next year.
BronyCon, which is, in many ways, the premier Brony event, which capped out at 10,000 people, I think back in 2015, has announced plans to make next year's BronyCon the last BronyCon. And they are not the only ones. Some people have started to speculate that this spells the end of the Brony community as we know it.
Well, it's not just the BronyCon or the other conventions shutting down. It's also because Hasbro has announced, well, it was
It's
leaked.
all tied together. It's all tied together.
It was leaked that Hasbro intends on Season 9 being the last season of Friendship is Magic. And when it was also leaked what Gen 5 was going to look like, in certain controversial tweets by one of the new writers, everyone started saying it was going to go downhill, the fandom is going to implode, not to mention that the last 2 seasons of Friendship is Magic that have come out have not been...
friendly?
No, not to its adult fans, especially if you read between the lines like I do in the Equestrian Candidate. It gets a little hard to trudge through it when you know they openly are kind of hostile towards their adult fans now.
Just a little bit. Body pillows, guys. Why do you have them?
Well, it wasn't the body pillow episode that upset me specifically. But we can talk more about that.
But what you need to know is both BronyCon and another big one, I believe, out in Utah, Crystal Mountain PonyCon, have all indicated they're wrapping up. There's a bunch of BronyCons out there that have not announced similar plans yet, but that could just as easily be tied to the fact that Hasbro hasn't officially announced that G4 is over, correct?
Yeah, they haven't officially announced anything yet.
So if Season 9 is coming to a close and they announce that, you could see a continual exodus of that. Now, keep in mind, just because the cons are around doesn't mean that there isn't additional evidence that the fandom is kind of winding down. Now, you see a lot of this across fandom in general. The reason I think it's affecting Brony so much is because it really is a single topic fandom kind of a deal. When you have anything to compare it to, you don't really compare it to the anime fandom per se. You might compare it to the Star Trek fandom, or the He-Man fandom, or the Rocky Horror fandom, where, yeah, there is room for these specialized groups, either in part of the wider fandom community, part of another con, but as far as single con issues, there's a much smaller pool. Like, I don't know of that many Rocky Horror cons. I don't know of that many Star Trek-specific cons. Even before BronyCon announced that they were ending, attendance was already on the downturn, and that's not a healthy sign for the fandom as a whole, because the most visible aspect of fandom participation, as we've discussed earlier in the podcast, is attending conventions. That's part of the active participation. That's what makes you part of fandom. And the numbers that I've seen has it going from about 10,000 people at its height to just about 5,500 at its most recent incarnation. I think that was per Polygon.
Mm-hmm. Well, Equestria Daily, which is one of the biggest fan news sites for My Little Pony, seems to agree with that assessment of attendance. Now, I'm not sure I completely agree with where Equestria Daily went on their particular rant.
Oh, do tell.
They argue that the reason Friendship is Magic got so popular was because of the art style. And that's the only reason. Yeah, it was because of the art style, and that's the only reason. It wasn't because of the
Newgrounds. Guys,
and
the reason Steven Universe is so popular is because of the art style.
I disagree with that. We all, at least most of the bronies that I know of, and for me personally, we all fell in love with the way Lauren Faust decided, why are we having ponies going on tea parties? Why can't girly shows be more
adventure driven?
Yeah, like we're girls,
not constant gooey, crusty, goody two shoes, as she said once.
Right, and now that she is not on the show and not really giving much of her input, we're seeing it basically return to the same morals every show.
They also pulled a Yu-Gi-Oh! GX. Now it's just a school about friendship.
Oh, God.
Draw your last pathetic friendship, Yugi.
Not that arc. Again, that's the point, is
I lay my tea party face down in defense position and end my turn. How will you obtain my friend points?
But, dude...
Oh my god, I'm so amazed by this. Why don't they have friendship points? They might as well. Okay, tangent. I apologize. Continue.
But that's proving my point. We saw the decline not when they started to announce, not when the leaks happened, of, that friendship is magic is ending. But when we saw the decline in story arc, where we were no longer getting any plot-driven, and I would say even the movie definitely started to divide the Brony community because...
Almost certainly, because the movie was terrible.
And I can tell you for a fact, you tell that to a really, you could go on any forum and you had really hardcore bronies telling you if you did not like the movie, you were not allowed to be a brony anymore. You drove your own fan population away by splitting us down the middle of who liked the movie and who didn't. And anyone who watched all 7 seasons up to that point and saw that the movie was going to become canon.
I even saw one particular quote from one particular fan artist talking about how she was only going to do Equestria Girls art now, in particular with the expected roll-up of G4. And I thought that was actually something really interesting because, I mean, you'd know more about this than I do. Equestria Girls is basically original to G4, correct? There hasn't been
anthropomorphic, no.
Anthropomorphism.
No. It's definitely something specific to G4. But that being said, somebody who started this fandom by watching Equestria Girls, they really let us down in that department too. They got really close to finally giving back to the adult fans in the Equestria Girls world, and they only made 3 seasons of this little arc where it was all about Sunset Shimmer, and then they didn't do anything else with it.
Kind of you need an evil crossover plot or something.
Dude, they had one episode where Sunset Glimmer came over. And it was the greatest episode ever because while in the pony world, she's always getting told to shut up and basically sit in a corner, your solutions aren't right, and it ends up being her solutions that are correct. In this world, they took her seriously and actually listened to her. And I'm like, I want this. But they didn't give us. No.
Celestia is awesome in Equestria Girls. Clearly troll-tastic.
Well, she's troll-tastic everywhere, but
yes,
that's
of course
besides
she
the
is.
point. So Equestria Daily, while everybody else, Polygon was all yeah, it's declining, blah, blah, blah. Equestria Daily is all no, we're not. What we need to do now is focus on fan art, fan creators, fan animations, fan fiction. We need to give all of these creators and people who, if you can't create content, you have to support the people who create content. And I'm
I mean, that's fine.
I'm not saying don't do that. By all means, the people who do fan fiction, fan create anything like that in a creative sense, they go on to do better things as long as you do a little bit of encouragement if you like their stuff. But my problem with that is we're already selling G5 short. We're not even giving it a chance. Especially in that article, it was very much let's not even go on to see the next generation of My Little Pony. And for me, that's kind of doing a disservice already. You're already discrediting it. It's, again, this whole, my generation was the best, and the next generation is going to suck. But look at Pokemon. They basically survive on constantly bringing out new generations and changing up the thing every so often. And they've survived, how many years has it been now for Pokemon?
A very long time.
We could do
20 plus years, I believe. Yeah.
I mean, the problem with Hasbro is it's going to change every so often. Look at their toy line.
Yeah, don't you know anything about how to sell toys? You gotta kill them off.
Okay.
One way or the other. One way or the other. Either reboot the show or literally kill them.
Yeah.
We've already established that maybe that latter idea not the best idea, so let's just reboot the show.
So it's going to be rebooted eventually. Friendship is Magic could have never lasted. I mean, I was surprised it lasted this long.
I'll be completely honest, until you started doing new research on your panel, I thought that it was just on permanent hiatus after season 5. But with that being said, the reboot plans that we have been advised about, have been leaked, it still sounds like the key characters that we're familiar with are in the works with that. That's not going anywhere. We're not getting like a whole cast redo.
So we are getting the same characters. I know that they'll be different. Like I know that the problem is the pictures we got of the new cast are just, what promos. They're not even like finalized design. So we don't know if the stuff that we've seen so far for G5 is even going to actually be what ends up being canon for G5.
Good point.
So that's one point to make. So when I talk about the stuff that's coming up, it's like, yes, for the most part, it sounds like they are still trying to keep the main 6 around, but slightly different.
Yeah. I'm curious to compare it because, well, let's just face it, the original My Little Pony cartoon doesn't have enough of a carryover into modern fandom. It never did. It fell short of the convention boom of the 90s. So it was, for example, it didn't work its way into the anime community of virtually at all.
No.
So what it's going to be interesting for me personally is to compare it to what has happened and will be happening with the Thundercats group. Because we're seeing that similar resistance of old fans versus new fans. And Thundercats already has the interesting problem of they had the original, they had a reboot already that was still that kind of classical look.
Yeah.
Just updated. Mm-hmm. And it didn't do well enough for them to continue with the project, unfortunately, even though it's actually kind of good. And now we have the Newgrounds style one. What some people like to call the Cal Art style one coming out. And of course, everyone is just shitting their pants about it. No one wants to give this thing a chance. And I mean,
well,
I kind of feel them on the whole art style issue, but I'm still like, yeah, let's just wait.
My issue with it is, so everyone's losing their shit over, they're like, for instance, I think the concept art for Fluttershy is she's now an earth pony or unicorn, I forget. She's a whole different pony. Huh. And I'm like, I want to remind the fans, if you watch the old animation, you'll start to realize Rarity is a combination of a few of the old ones. Spike also actually showed up in the old My Little Pony. You can actually find Moondancer back in the day, and there's Applejack. For Applejack is G1. Rainbow Dash also, their appearances change. Their type of pony that they are change. A lot of it is reused from the old generations of My Little Pony if you take the time and comb out the old stuff. So while we're all like, oh my god, they're changing them from this type of pony to that type of pony, just remember that we kind of took a lot of the Gen 1 and Gen 2's stuff too and remade it into something new. So we are not that different from, say, Generation 1, who probably felt the same way when Generation 2 came out and was different ponies, or slightly modded ponies.
I'm trying to think if there are similar cases of this, where you have a property that has an original form, and then it gets a reboot, and then the reboot is what actually carries into people's memories. I think the only thing that really compares to that is G.I. Joe. Because you have the original G.I. Joe. And I mean, there isn't really an original G.I. Joe media property. There was an original G.I. Joe toy. And then that got rebooted into G.I. Joe Real American Hero. And that is the one that people visualize when it comes to G.I. Joe. And every attempt to bring G.I. Joe back since then has not nearly been as successful.
Mm-hmm. And we just may see the same thing happening to My Little Pony at this point.
Could be. And I mean, I feel you guys. I feel you. All right. Friendship is Magic did something that My Little Pony hadn't been able to do before. It took a very much more adventure-centric, less goody two-shoes. Man, I love that phrase, goody two-shoes. It really does describe original My Little Pony very well. A little bit like Care Bears without the villain.
I mean, it's the reason why we all liked Powerpuff Girls. Girly, but still kick-ass.
I think that about wraps it up for the Bronies discussion. So this is what you need to know, guys. Things are changing. The Brony fandom as a nationwide phenomenon is probably on the wind down. I think its high water mark was when it had its own parody episode on Bob's Burgers, honestly. Good times. However, there is a new series that we expect to come out in the works. And for us here at Manly Battleships, we're curious to see that come out before we make a ruling on what the ultimate future of the Brony community will be. Stay tuned for that. It's time now for our video break. We have an all-new video for you. Aren't you excited? I'm super excited. For those of you on the audio-only edition, you should try checking out the YouTube at some point whenever you're done with this. We have placeholders. You can skip right to it.
Hey, Panda. It's September now.
Cinnamon, apples, maple, pumpkin spice!
And welcome back from that video break. We hope you enjoyed it. We're going to be rolling right into our next segment here. The List of the Week. This week we're going to be talking about the 5 Netflix anime that you need to watch right now. Like, you need to drop what you're doing and go watch it right now because you have no idea how long some of these are going to actually stick around. So it's very important you go do it now because they're so good. We're going to talk about this second rock star. There's a lot of things on here that you need to take note of. First and foremost, I'm going to talk to you about The Disastrous Life of Psyche K. This 2016 anime is great because it mimics old anime so well. I love it to death. It's stylistically, it's artistically, narrative structure, very similar to a lot of shows you used to see in the 90s. It focuses in on this one gentleman, Psyche, who is a super powerful psychic, so much so that he actually has to wear these little bulbs on his head to contain his powers, lest he accidentally launch a nuclear weapon or something. And he spends his entire everyday life trying to avoid letting people know that he is a powerful psychic. The only people who know for sure are his parents. It's great. Next on the list is Tiger and Bunny. I'm sure a couple of you do know, in fact, what this show is. It had its heyday when it first came out back in 2011. Similar to Nodame Cantabile, in fact, that it had that little upsurge of, oh yeah, it's the great show. You gotta watch it. And then, oh no, I've never heard of that. What are you talking about? Tiger and Bunny tells the story of a city where superheroes are outsourced to corporate sponsors. There are people who have superpowers, but imagine, if you will, Batman sponsored by Kellogg cereal. Or I guess black lip gloss would probably be more his style, wouldn't it? Good stuff. Next on the list is the oldest of the ones that I have here, Gunslinger Girl from 2003. It's about cybernetic implants into young girls where they get trained to be assassins. It starts off as this real action-focused anime and becomes, well, drama. That's all I'll say about it. Check it out when you have the time. Next, we're going to talk briefly about Kakegurui, the 4th show on this list. That's the most recent one from 2017. It's also known as Kakegurui Compulsive Gambler. It's about a school where the entire focus is not so much academic achievement, but how much you can win inside gambling. And if you are terrible at gambling and you go into debt, you end up someone's pet. Ha ha ha. In rolls this new transfer student. Of course, transfer student. Who is very, very good and gets off from the act of risking it all. Do with that what you will. They actually also have the live-action version, I think, on Netflix right now, too, if you're all interested in trying that out. Finally, this is the only one that Rockstar has actually seen.
Don't shame me. I'm going through Stranger Things right now.
Agretsuko. It's about this tiny little office red panda and her joyous, rewarding job. Rockstar, tell us about your impressions of Agretsuko.
It's Sanrio characters with death metal, and it's amazing. I hate death metal. I love Sanrio. And apparently the mix of the two is just fantastic. If you haven't watched it, it's 10 quick episodes, 15 minutes apiece. It's really short, but it's really good. About
office work dynamics and female empowerment. I'll tell you what it reminds me of. It reminds me a lot of Detroit Metal City. Now, I know that you didn't see that.
No, I've watched pieces of it.
Okay.
I have watched pieces
In
of
Detroit
it.
Metal City, you have a similar thing, where in the case of Agretsuko, you have this hardworking office girl who just goes to karaoke and sings death metal to pull off steam. In the case of Detroit Metal City, you have this kid who really wants to make it as a Swedish pop singer. Like, he just really likes singing these uplifting acoustic guitar notes, and he nightlifes as the death metal god Krausasaba.
Well, yes, because there is the dynamic where the red panda, she is so cute, so quiet, so meek and so humble at work, but at night she goes off to the karaoke lounge. She's known there, and she just rocks her heart out. I love her.
It's great. You need to check it out. In fact, since the shortest one on the list here, that's probably the first thing you should see if you haven't already. And if you have, tell us what you think down in the comments below. Now we're into our final discussion topic. The Chronicles of the Counter-Earth, otherwise known as Gore, and the wider implications from the genius mind of John Norman.
The very interesting mind of John Norman.
The careful viewer will note that the first 3 books in the series, first editions, by the way, first press run editions, are here on this table.
You're very proud of those, aren't you?
I'm very proud of them. Hopefully, I'll manage to get him to sign a couple before he decides to pass on. For those of you unfamiliar with what we're talking about and who can't be bothered to go look at some of our other videos or go to the panel just yet, here's what you need to know. John Norman's Chronicles of the Counter-Earth, more frequently known as Gore, just Gore, starts with the first book, Tarnsman of Gore, and progresses through a 30-plus novel series to date. It's been through a couple different publishers, due primarily to its increasing inanity, but it started all the way back in the 1960s. It had its heyday in going through the early 1980s. There was a bit of a drop-off for a while where he wasn't writing any more books, but then it came back pretty hard in the late 90s after he switched publishers again, and I think now it's really mostly digital distribution is where he's seeing any of the money coming from the literature at this point. We also have a fantastic I shouldn't say that. We have a as good as it gets audiobook narration by, you might recognize the name, Ralph Lister. Ralph Lister, the anime voice actor for Walter in the series Hellsing, actually narrates all the Gore books in the audiobook format. So, next time you see him at a convention, you should totally ask him about it. See how he likes that.
There's also a big fan community on Second Life. Pretty active community. But you kind of have to be really into Gore to be in those places, so it's kind of hard to break through to a community.
We can talk a little bit more of that towards the end here. Sticking first with the books, though, give us a couple of your impressions of the first book.
Well, see, the problem with Gore is when I didn't want to read it for the longest time because of the implications of slave girls and other things that go with Gore.
Again, for those of you who haven't read it, Gore is about this one guy, Tarl Cabot, who is transported by the semi-godly priest kings to the Counter-Earth Gore. And this is a really interesting premise from a science fiction standpoint, because at the time when the book was first written, it actually was within the realm of plausibility. See, the Counter-Earth is just that. The planet Gore is literally on the exact opposite side of the solar system from Earth at any one time. And when this came out in the 60s, it's not like we had a bunch of satellite technology that could have disproved the existence of Gore at the time. So it's actually written as if it's a memoir that's been planted on Earth after the fact. Kind of an interesting premise. I'll give him that. And the thing with Gore is that it's a slightly smaller version of Earth, and it's primarily medieval, and the gravity is higher and all that good. Well, the gravity is actually lower.
Lower.
My apologies. And when Tarl Cabot is transported to this planet, he finds out that, oh, my missing father has been living here. There's this whole civilization that's mostly based on Greco-Roman norms. And, of course, as Rockstar mentioned, there is a heavily embellished slave society because of the nature of how their society works. It's mostly city-states. They war against each other constantly. And, in particular, women are a big prize in the intra-city fighting that goes on.
Yeah, so as a I don't know if I want to use that word.
As a fan? Are you a fan? A fan of gore? Oh my god.
That's not. As an independent woman who don't need no man, I was turned off by the concept of slave girls and women being used as prizes to be won. But when you actually read the first novel, so the main woman in the novel, Talina, she's actually very, not what you would expect for somebody. Of course, she is what is she? The daughter of the U-Bar. The U-Bar. But she does become kind of a slave girl and gets put in her place. If you want to. But she's so stubborn and so free-willed that she is not a very good slave girl. She's supposed to be playing the part so that her and Tarl don't get basically caught in the act of she's not actually a slave girl. But she can't do it. She maintains so much of her free will, and she's really the reason that drew me into her and Tarl's ridiculousness of trying to be a Gorian while also maintaining this inner monologue of having slave girls are wrong. Using them for bait is wrong. So Tarl also kind of helps you navigate this world where he doesn't feel comfortable doing all the things that is natural in Gorian society. So,
at least at first.
Yeah, we're not the sequel, man. Tarl, you can't attack the bartender for pulling out a shotgun on you, Tarl.
Tarl, that kills people.
Yeah, he becomes a little too Gorian by the time he comes back from her.
You haven't even gotten to book 6 yet.
I just started book 2 where he attempted to attack the bartender.
As the series progresses, it goes from... I was going to say it goes from being an immersive extrapolation of society. No, it never stops being that.
Oh, no.
It goes from being a story of an Earthman having conflicts with his dual identity to being something very different. I liked, when I discussed this issue with my brother, I like to say that the rule of thumb for John Norman novels is that about every 3 books, you have an interesting story. Once you get past, the first 3 are pretty decent in my opinion. Especially, I really like the third one. The third one is actually really great. Priest Kings of Gore, where you find out all the secrets of the Priest Kings.
And I'm sure by when you mean all the secrets, you literally mean all the secrets.
Yes.
Because, here's the thing with John Norman, if you haven't seen...
Oh, he world builds. He would be the world's greatest DM.
Yeah.
Oh my, or the world's worst DM.
Dude, you've been monologuing for over an hour. I just want to kill some goblins.
I feel like the only people who would enjoy sitting in a John Norman led DM session would be myself, you, and Uncle Yo. I could definitely say Uncle Yo getting a kick out of just how detailed John Norman is at times.
Why do I need to know their traditional food on this holiday? It's not even the holiday yet.
This detail extends to some of his other writing too, which we'll get here to in a minute. But in addition to that, another fun peculiarity of John Norman books, at least in the original ones. I can't speak for the later ones because I'll be completely honest. I still have not
books, man.
I haven't got past, I think, book 14.
I'm amazed you got that far.
I was very dedicated to trying to make this work.
It'll be a race to the finish. You and me, Panda.
I know, right?
You were saying.
Some of the nuances, of course, whenever he introduces you into a new environment, and of course, as you might expect when you have to constantly expand the world that you're working with, you find out that gore isn't necessarily just confined to that concept of Greco-Romanism. It also has a bunch of other kind of biomes that are far off from the normal area of Gorian society that have correlations to other things on Earth. So, of course, then he has to go through developing even more of his gore version of those societies at times.
I only got through the first book. You're telling me there's other civilizations that he goes on length about?
Listen. Okay, well, it varies. I mean, you don't have... Really, you don't have...
known.
It doesn't get that bad until you get to Savages of Gore. Savages of Gore is a whole different story. But in any case, the other thing that I wanted to highlight here is, I would read you a passage, but I don't want to disturb the pony here. He has immaculate, that is the word, immaculate grammar.
Oh, dude, not just his grammar, his vocabulary.
It's painfully immaculate.
Oh my god.
I'm genuinely, I used to think that Ralph Lister, when he was narrating the audiobook, was just had his flow a particular way. But then I realized, no. Yes, Ralph Lister is a proper British accented gentleman, and that is literally how John Norman writes. He writes with exacting precision, which is undoubtedly tied to his college... he's retired now, but his college professorship was in English.
Well...
So, this makes sense.
Take Tolkien and, bump that up, 10 levels. At least. You know, when you read Tolkien, it's not like reading John Norman. He is just... I'm just saying in eloquence, in vocabulary, and in grammar. He just goes way beyond.
There's so many commas in this sentence.
There's so many commas, and I can't. It's just...
And correctly placed semicolons.
It's definitely, I won't say, it's different. It's different than most of the media out there, so it's kind of one of those learning curves, and you learn it, the very first page. It's obvious from the very first page. He doesn't lead you in it with any other, it's literally eloquence from sentence 1.
Man, we got a lot more deep into that than I originally planned for.
It's John Norman. He's
oh my God.
Detailed that it takes 3 paragraphs to talk about just one landscape.
And you're going to find out, not like you said, you won't even find out the traditional dish of that day. You're going to find out that... How
they prepare it, who's allowed to prepare it.
No.
What?
You're also going to find out that I went to this fair, and this fair has its own special rules under merchant law. Would you like to know how merchant law works? No. See, merchant law spreads across the whole of Gore and is applicable because it's in the interest of the economy for merchants to enforce it no matter where you are. And if the cities don't do it, well, then they're going to get screwed over by all the other merchants, so they have to do it no matter what the law is in the city. And that's how merchant laws works. Meanwhile, by the way, time is kept at this freaking fair, too. And it's kept in this very particular way.
Oh, Jesus Christ. Thank you, John. We're moving on.
Having entered the fair now. That's how it works.
It really is how it works. Suddenly you'll find yourself on a tangent where were we? I don't remember where we were in the story, but now I know a shit ton about merchant law in Gore.
This isn't the only thing that John Norman has written. There actually is another series called the Talnarian series. That's a little more of... This is technically sci-fi, to begin with, obviously, because other plans saw that. But this is something that's more in the line with, in fact, in many ways, draws upon, inspiration-wise, the John Carter series. The John Carter of Mars, so it's Sword and Planet. Talnarian series is a lot more science fiction-y. In addition to that, he also has written his very own book about sex, which came out a couple of years into the development of this series.
Oh, favorite
in the
book.
70s, you know, back then.
Favorite book.
And that's why we're going to now talk a little bit about his views on sex and sexuality. It comes up every now and then, but Norman is notorious for not being interested in doing interviews for reasons that are expressed frequently in the few interviews that he's done and in the book about sex. Now, Rockstar has read into that particular volume a lot more than I have, even though I don't think you finished it either.
I'll explain why I haven't finished it. So,
because of all the details.
His book about sex, it's a few chapters of his specific views on it. Fine. But the rest of the book is essentially role-playing characters you can play. So it's essentially all these role-play scenarios. And being John Norman, it's literally the D&D role-playing manual for sex. He delves so far into these other, not just roles, but the world that the people are taking, that this role play is taking place in. So it's not just, hey, why don't you play a nurse and I'll play patient? It's in a world where a nurse, where women are sent to psychiatry, facilities because they're too uptight about sex. These nurses are going to take advantage of you now, and you have to give in. It literally down to every detail, down to the socio-economic, political reasons why women are being incarcerated into that particular psychiatric facility.
John Norman really believes in getting into your character. He wants to provide all the psychological reasons why you're doing what you're doing. All the political, socio-economic factors that go into why you're going to be taken advantage of right now between pages 23 and 24.
And hence why I haven't finished the book, because I don't want to read about all the different worlds and all the different characters. In fact, if you give me it has a table of contents, of course, where it tells you all the specific role plays. I could literally just pull out and make the John Norman turn into the Cosmo, just by telling you the basic roles. But no, of course, if you really wanted to make your sex life into D&D, I would definitely recommend you look up, what's the name of it's John Norman on sex, isn't it?
Yeah, it's something like, I'll be completely honest with you, I haven't looked at the book one recently. It's on the shelf in the other room. Like, I could go get it, but I'm too lazy for that. We'll post it right above my head. How's that?
Yeah, we'll do that.
So yeah, if you want a very immersive manual about sex, that's one way to do it. Now, as far as his views on sex as a personal individual, that for me is a very interesting discussion point because of how it ties into his development of the Gore series that we're talking about. He's expressed both in that volume about sex and separately in interviews that when he first started writing about it, and he started writing about the dynamics and the implications that it has on sex in the world of Gore, he was getting a lot of contemporary criticism. Keep in mind, from a political standpoint, John Norman was writing in a period that was right at the height of a lot of the progressive movements. In the 1960s, we of course had the mainstream civil rights discussion. We had the rise of second-wave feminism, all the things that political theorists and women's studies individuals like to highlight and discuss all the time. So, where does that play into this?
Well, I was going to say you could also argue the sexual revolution, which is when you read the book, it's very much, it recalls back a lot of the sexual revolutional ideals, where it's like, you know, we should have the freedom to have sex and to talk about sex and to view sex as a natural thing between two people and not be so hung up on this Puritan ideal of not talking about it. Oh, it's sacred. Oh, you can't do that. That's naughty. And when we're talking about the second wave feminism, it's also really interesting because he points out that women needed to get out of their own way to have sex. That women were way too stuck up to just agree that they needed to be fucked every once in a while. Those are his words, not mine. He literally goes out of the way.
Well, I mean,
Demonetized.
it's an interesting way to put it, too, though. I mean, of course, a lot of the discussion that we're harping on is framed within those decades.
Yes.
And so they don't necessarily have the same nuance today. But, for example, if you were to look at it historically, early feminism most certainly was tied into prudery. In fact, no one likes to remind everyone about this, but the temperance movement in particular, the outlawing of booze, that was all tied to first wave feminism. Meanwhile, in the case of second wave feminism, there was a huge tie-in, and I think to a certain extent you still see that tie-in, though it's less prominent now because of the sex positivity aspect of feminism today. Mm-hmm. Anti-porn. Anti-porn was a very big cry in second wave groups, from my understanding. So, in the time of John Norman, there was that entire. It was just, in fact, it's not even necessarily just confined to feminism. It was a society-wide argument about the appropriateness of erotic literature, the appropriateness of erotic films. Pornography was just starting to come out onto the scene. Hence,
what I was saying earlier, the sexual revolution. It was just coming and clashing against the feminists who were starting to come out against, that's degrading to us. Now it's more of, well, what if she wants to show her tits?
We're going to get demonetized every time you say cum.
I'm just saying. Tits. And there's a lot of those values of more of the sexual revolution than the feminist revolution, but you can definitely, when you read it, I don't know if those are his views now, because this is a slightly older book. He's always been about being open about sex. And you can also kind of see that in the Gore series. I mean, he doesn't shy away from nudity. He doesn't shy away from talking about sex and sex slaves even in Gore.
It's a really weird note about that, though. So I don't know if this was him being the old man in the room or what, but one of the other things that I'm going to point out here really quick, because we're talking so much about his views on sex, there's this very weird nuance within the Gore series for the first several books. And unless one of you have combed through these books more thoroughly than I have, and have found something to the contrary, I stand on this point. He never directly refers to a penis until, like, book 11.
I mean, I haven't... Yeah, I don't remember.
It's so weird, because I think it's book 11. It's... whichever number it is, it's Tribesmen of Gore, where he's out in the desert, of course. Mm-hmm. And he breaks into this, like, caliphite compound and ends up having sex with this girl. And John Norman then directly refers to his manhood, and I was just like, whoa! John Norman just talked about a penis! So, I mean, that... I'm just throwing it out there as a triviality.
Well, I mean, give the guy a break. I think when he wrote these, he was getting heavy criticism because when he's not talking about his views on sex in this particular novel about his views on sex, he's also talking about how critically panned his books were because of the notion of sex. And
he's definitely a little bitter.
It's definitely a little bitter because he's not directly talking about anybody, but you know what he's saying. He's definitely calling out his critics when it comes to sex, and he's very bitter about it, but he just won't openly say it. So there is definitely that side of it too when you're reading the views on sex, is how angry he is. So I bet you the reason he never mentioned a manhood until book 11 is when it was finally okay for him to talk about a penis. Because he was very angry that he couldn't be more open about sex.
And it's unfortunate in a way, because there are definitely elements in the story that always amuse me, that entertain me, that make me interested to see more. But he just has these very odd mechanical storytelling methods. Like, for example, retelling aspects of the story as if you've never read a book before. John, I'm pretty sure by book 11, if they haven't read the other books, they're not reading book 11. But be that as it may, there was also the issue of and this is probably tying into what I just talked about with the whole penis thing. It's known that as the books progress, it gets more extreme. You see more of that degradation. You get a little more diving into the slavery aspect, which I know a lot of people are uncomfortable with, which also seems to be, those are the books from which a lot of what we know in the Gorian subculture derive themselves from. We've already mentioned the Second Life culture, where, from my understanding of what you've been telling me, there's even portions where if you come in as a female character, you're automatically like, oh yeah, someone can just run up and throw a net on you, and you're their slave.
The thing with the Gorian subsections of Second Life, from what I understand, is they're very serious about their role-playing.
Super. Serial.
You are on a time schedule. Problem with Second Life is anywhere other than the Gorian Sims, you will notice that there is a predominantly female population. Of course, realize that most of the females are probably men in real life, not all of them, but you can be whatever you want. You can have multiple characters. But I know slaves have their own time where you have to log in, you have to be in that role play for so long. They also have combat AOs that you attach to your character, and if you die, you cannot come back to the sim for a whole 24 hours, and then you're allowed to re-enter the group, because you can never truly die. You just get sent back home to wherever your home is in Second Life.
And it's not just in Second Life that a lot of these individuals are hardcore. Now, there is a very strong role-playing community surrounding the world of gore. It's not just Second Life. I've seen some websites. There's actually an entire subsection of this fandom. In fact, it's practically separate, that focuses on a game that he developed that's a spin-off of chess called Kaisa. But in the real world, there's also taking the strokes from the fictional world and applying what John Norman has offered up in his own kind of attitude towards sex, a subculture in real life that are also known as Gorians, and what they do is they essentially live the life as portrayed in some of the later volumes. They live their life as Kajira, where they are the slave of the master of the household, and all that good stuff. Now, the reason that this has probably come up on your radar before is for unfortunate reasons. Gorians are not always portrayed in the best light, and in fact, they've had some run-ins with the law over the course of years, which has further drawn them into the more nefarious side of depictions. I'm speaking particularly here of another group spin-off of Gorians called the Coatians. Mm-hmm. They were highlighted in the late 2000s due to their leader, Mr. Lee Thompson, who ended up going to jail because he was convicted of sex crimes because he forced his girlfriend at the time to have sex with several other men as part of this master-slave dynamic with the whole Gorian thing. And so even though he had his own little name going on there, he had his own little set distinction, he's frequently lumped in with the rest of the individuals who follow that particular subculture. And Gorians are basically on the bottom of the totem pole when it comes to sex-related stuff, at least in public perception. I'd go as far as to say that Gorians are lower down the run than individuals who participate in sex as furries. That's how low they've managed to sink themselves on this totem pole. And in classic BDSM communities, they are kind of the butt of the joke. They're the BDSM community's furries.
Which I find weird because essentially,
specifically.
Unless because again, I've only read book 1 and part of book 2. Unless I'm mistaken, it is essentially just BDSM with just a little bit more sci-fi fantasy elements added to it.
The reason that his depiction gets particular scrutiny from people who have been made aware of it is the psychological aspects. John Norman's take on master-slave relationships in the world of gore focuses heavily on the idea that in our primal state, the submissive female and the dominant male is the strict order of things.
Well, he mentions that in his sex book, too. He does kind of say that.
And there are times when Tarl makes the concessions to the fact that Earth is different on that subject. However, as I've alluded to, his psyche also tends to change over the course of the years he spends on Gore. And the reason that it's considered so controversial is that the people who adopt Gorianism as their particular sex subculture also kind of buy into that as well. And that is very controversial. The idea that there is a dominant and submissive sex in the human experience. Just naturally.
Okay, I can understand that. But for me, at the end of the day, as long as they're not hurting other people or their partner, I don't care what you do in the bedroom.
Well, I mean, we can all say that from a theoretical standpoint. We can also talk about a whole lot of other things in our society that we adhere to in principle until we're faced with having to deal with it firsthand, I guess. I don't think that Gorians in and of themselves are a threat to anyone. Of course, you always have basket cases like the Coatians.
Oh, yeah, no, I'm saying that, like...
I think, though, that the problem is... I don't know. I think the existence of the Gorian subculture certainly overshadows any relevance the literature has to the science fiction community. It's like you can't bring up John Norman without someone talking about what a terrible person he is and how he wants to just turn Earth into a master slave, all women are in chains society. It's a little bit ridiculous at times, honestly, because there is something to these books that are not only useful from a consumer standpoint, but I mean, in certain things in the books actually have contributed to the science fiction continuum. The concept of a counter-Earth is an invention of John Norman, and it's been used by other people in the future. And while he himself has almost certainly borrowed a little bit, at minimum, from other people in the past, most particularly the John Carter series, in my opinion, I think that the world he builds in the Gore series is just more interesting than some of the other pseudo inner solar system worlds that people have dreamt up over the past several decades.
For me, it was one of those series that I didn't think I was going to be able to get into. And I definitely, even from a modern reader standpoint, I think it's fine. It's very telling for its times, but it's an interesting world. If you really get immersed into other fantasy worlds, if you really like the world building, it's definitely the book for you.
You can skip the movies. Unless, of course, you're watching the Mystery Science Theater version of the second one, Outlaw of Gore. Then, sure, go ahead. You don't need to see the movies, though.
But I think even with his controversial views in the Book of Sex, where the submissive female and the male dominant male is a worldview, I don't think. I mean, I feel like at the end of the day, we have creators even nowadays who hold very controversial worldviews, and we still consume their media. So why should this be any different?
Yeah, and look at the bright side, guys. He's getting up there in years. It's not like he's going to crank out 10 more books before he's dead. Oh, no, John, why? I know Elizabeth Cardwell is very strumpety. Stop talking about it. You have no idea what I'm talking about.
No.
Don't worry about it. Oh, man, John Norman. I think that the series Gore could work really well as a series. And in a world where people are kind of looking for that next takeover for Game of Thrones, because Game of Thrones has set a new trend in what people would probably be willing to sit through. We had the semi-failure of Marco Polo, at least from a critical standpoint. I think that if HBO or somebody who had a talented writing team got on board with adapting John Norman's Gore series, they could probably make something really interesting out of it.
I'm not sure about that.
Now listen, hear me out on this. I had this discussion with a couple other people too, and I think I can convince you. part of the problem is you haven't read past the second book yet. Within the first 3 books, there is so much material just splayed out there that what could really happen is that a writing team could take the world-building material that's present and expound upon the story of the first book in a way that gives you your first season right off the bat. The problem for me with the first book is that so much of the main narrative really does not take that long to tell. But there is so much else going on within the world of Gore that you automatically have, well, what some people would call filler episodes, but really, Charles should have spent a lot more time wandering around doing stuff on Gore and having adventures if he wanted this to be, a great story.
That's not my problem with it.
All right, go ahead.
I know the thing with Gore is it has so much material. I'm sure that they could find a story, and especially Tarl's story, and tell it.
So what's your problem?
My problem is it'll be way too controversial for this day and age. At the end of the day...
Wait, now hear me out, though. The part that, in my opinion, needs to be played up to get around the controversy, I mean, I'll be honest with you. I suppose that there will definitely be a contingent that is super against it no matter what we say. But think about it. The conflict that he has as an Earthman on Gore is super present.
Oh, no, I like that part.
And that's gone in all the books later on.
Dude, it's gone chapter 1 of book 2.
No. Listen. You have to read the first 6 books. The first 6 books is really what gives you the full scope of what the best parts of what Gore has to offer. And I think that continued conflict within himself could be augmented. I think that John Norman never really gets around to fully playing up that nuance of his story. That Tarl as a person really constantly wrestles with, I see what they're getting at here, but this still feels wrong. And it comes up again and again, but it's never really brought up to the forefront. I think that if you were to adapt this to a series that mostly focused on him as a character through, I'll guesstimate, within the first 8 books of the series, there is a whole lot of material. And if they focus on that as one of the central narratives, him dealing with being a man who doesn't like slavery, but has to live with slavery, I think that could be really interesting.
Well,
it does change the course of his character's narrative, but then I don't think I'm looking at a series that's going to be adapted from all 30 books. I'm thinking about a series that might work through his development into his alternate identity, Bosk of Port Car.
Well, I guess the issue I have with it is not so much that I don't think it'll be great, especially from that point of view. My worriment is we're in a pro-boycott society. And the problem is with most people already assuming Gore or attaching Gore to not so nice things and people. I just see it as people will see Gore. Somebody will attach it to this, what's his name? Lee Thompson. And other not so nice things, and then suddenly there will be a petition to boycott the upcoming series of Gore. And I say this not because, I don't want to see it. I would love to see Gore adapted to not even the silver screen. I just want to see it, even if it's a Netflix original series.
No, that's a thought.
But
funny fact, Netflix had Gore on there for a while, which actually surprised me.
Oh,
like the movie.
The movies, yeah. I would love to see it, but I just worry that I know that whoever decides to take this on as a project is going to get boycott, and it just makes me sad. We can't see something that's slightly controversial because immediately you'll have the people go up in arms and boycott. And just because the name is already attached to something unpleasant.
We have nowhere to go from there. Wrapping up that discussion topic, we're going to head into the final stage of Duelists and Drunkards. That's pretty cool. This one comes from Rockstar. Go ahead.
All right, well, I'm going to take you back to about 1983. Hasbro and Takara decide to make a deal for Transformers. What you may not have known is that was actually a simultaneous deal done with My Little Pony. So Hasbro gets Transformers and Takara got My Little Pony. And they end up trying to create a toy line out of My Little Pony.
Which is not resembling ours at all.
No, not at all. I'll have you post a little picture up here. They had some catalog pictures up. The unfortunate part about this is we're not sure if all of them were made.
Takara doesn't even know.
We have about maybe 1/4 of these toys out there. They're extremely hard to collect. I have the Japanese names here. It's My Little Pony Osharena Pony, or My Little Pony Stylish Pony. So they made some plushies. There were some wedding ponies. There was one called Kawaii Pony, Little Kawaii. Lily and Popo. And these are actually, this Kawaii Pony, Lily and Popo, are actually the most pirated versions. They're the ones that if you go looking for Takara My Little Pony, is what you'll most likely see. But they're almost always fake and come from Spain. Mostly because I think somebody found the mold somewhere. So, that's just a little interesting nod to our history. Something that we didn't expect to find when I was searching about My Little Pony history.
And that's pretty cool. Ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of our time here at Of Duelists and Drunkards. We would like to thank you for staying with us. We hope that you will continue viewing or listening to this podcast. We have Colossalcon East coming up in a few days, where we hope to see a bunch of you. Come by our table, buy some sweet merch, and I guess just enjoy your evening. Thank you for staying here at Of Duelists and Drunkards, the podcast where there are not any duelists, but there are plenty of drunkards.
Bye-bye!